I was 33 years old when the phone rang. The silence on the line told me everything before the words even came out. My father was gone. I expected grief, but mostly I felt a cold, numb relief, like a long shift had finally ended. I didn't know then that the real work was just starting. I didn't know that within 3 days, my sister would look me in the eye and call me a leech. I was 33 years old when the silence of my apartment was broken by the vibration of my phone against the kitchen counter. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of day that felt aggressively ordinary. I had just finished organizing my receipts for the month and was waiting for the kettle to boil. My life was like that now. It was a series of small, manageable tasks. It was quiet. It was safe. I had spent 6 years building walls around myself, brick by boring brick, to keep the chaos of my family out. When I saw the caller ID, I knew. It was not a number I called often, but it was one I had memorized in childhood. It was my father's landline. I picked it up. The voice on the other end was not my father. It was a paramedic. His tone practiced and flat. He told me my father had collapsed in the library of the main house. He told me time of death. He asked if I was Naomi Cook. I said yes. I hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the steam rising from the kettle. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing weight of loss that books and movies always promised. But instead, I felt a strange, cold sensation washing over me. It was not sadness. It was relief. It was the feeling of a heavy door finally clicking shut. My father was a complicated man. A man who viewed affection as a transaction and loyalty as a debt to be collected. We had not spoken in 6 months. Now, we never would again. I turned off the stove. I packed a bag. I drove 3 hours north to Maple Hollow through a driving rain that turned the highway into a blur of gray and charcoal. Maple Hollow was exactly as I remembered it. It was a town that prided itself on old money and older secrets, where the driveways were long and the memories were short. By the time I arrived, the machinery of death was already turning. The funeral had been arranged with a speed that suggested it had been pre-planned for years. The service took place 2 days later at St. Jude's, a stone church that smelled of damp wool and aggressive lilies. The pews were packed. I sat in the second row, watching the back of my mother's head. She was trembling, her small shoulders hunched under a black coat that looked too big for her. And then there was Elise. My sister arrived 10 minutes late. The heavy oak doors groaned open, and every head in the sanctuary turned. Elise did not just walk into a room. She conquered it. She was wearing a black dress that likely cost more than my car, tailored to sharp perfection. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. She was not alone. She was flanked by her husband, a man who always looked like he was posing for a campaign photo, and 3 or 4 other people I did not recognize. They moved around her like satellites, shielding her, holding her purse, handing her tissues before she even cried. I watched her walk up the aisle. She stopped at the front, touched our mother's shoulder for exactly 2 seconds, and then took her seat in the front row. She did not look at me, not once. Throughout the eulogies, strangers spoke about a man I did not know. They called him generous. They called him a pillar of the community. They spoke of his business acumen. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, feeling like an imposter. I was the daughter who left. Elise was the daughter who stayed. In the eyes of Maple Hollow, that made her the faithful one, and me the traitor. After the service, the reception line formed in the vestibule. The air was thick with humidity and the murmuring of condolences. I tried to stay in the corner, hoping to slip away to the hotel, but the crowd was too dense. Naomi, the voice was sharp. It cut through the low hum of conversation like a glass shattering. I turned. Elise was standing 3 feet away. Her eyes were dry. Her makeup was flawless. She held a glass of white wine in one hand, her knuckles white against the stem. "Hello?" "Elise?" I said. My voice sounded thin to my own ears. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume was overwhelming. It smelled of gardenias and cold ambition. I am surprised you had the nerve to show up, she said. Her voice was low, pitched so only I could hear, but the venom in it was loud. He was my father, too. I said. Elise laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Was he? You certainly did not act like it when he was sick. You were too busy playing the victim in the city. And now you are here. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in years. There were fine lines around her eyes that had not been there before. She looked tired. But under the exhaustion, there was a humming, frantic energy. I am here to pay my respects. I said, that is all. Elise took a sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving mine. You are here for the money. Do not insult my intelligence. Naomi, you smelled a payout and you came running. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was the old dynamic, instant and paralyzing. She was the prosecutor, and I was the defendant who had lost the file. I do not want his money. I said, you are a liar. She hissed. You are a leech. Naomi, that is what you have always been. You drain people dry and then you leave. Well, do not get comfortable. You are not going to get what you think you are going to get. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every time I had bailed her out when we were younger. Every time I had taken the blame for her mistakes, so our father would not cut her off. But I looked at the people around us, the judge's wife, the bank manager, the priest, and I knew how it would look, the unstable younger sister causing a scene at the funeral. So I did nothing. I just looked at her. You are causing a scene, I said quietly. Elise's eyes narrowed. The lack of reaction enraged her more than a scream would have. She leaned in, her lips almost brushing my ear. I am going to destroy you, she whispered. If you try to take one dime from this estate, I will bury you. She pulled back, smoothed her dress, and turned to a woman standing nearby. Her face transformed instantly into a mask of tragic grace. Oh, Mrs. Higgins, thank you so much for coming, Elise said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. It means so much to us. I walked away. My hands were shaking. I needed air. I made my way toward the side exit, but a hand caught my elbow. It was Mr. Henderson, the family attorney. He had been my father's lawyer for 30 years. He was a small, round man who usually smelled of peppermint and pipe tobacco. Today, he smelled of sweat. Naomi, he said. He looked around the room nervously, his eyes darting toward Elise. I'm glad I caught you. Hello, Mr. Henderson. I said, I need you to come by the office tomorrow. He said. He was talking fast. Just for a few minutes. Standard procedure. Just some acknowledgments to sign. Acknowledgments. I repeated. Yes, yes. Just waiving the formal reading. Acknowledging the filing of the will. Standard. It will save everyone a lot of time and legal fees. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. Elise has already reviewed everything. It is very straightforward. He handed me a business card. As he did, he fumbled, and a sheaf of papers tucked under his arm shifted. I saw the edge of a document. It was not on his firm's usual cream-colored stationery. It was bright white, with a stark blue logo at the top. I only caught the first letter, a sharp, angular V, before he clamped his arm down. Tomorrow at 10, he said. Please, it is better to get it over with. He hurried away before I could ask why he looked like a man who was being hunted. I found my mother near the coat check. She was staring at a painting on the wall, a generic landscape of a barn in winter. She looked lost. Mom, I said. She jumped. Oh, Naomi, you are leaving. I think it is best. I said. Elise is upset. Patricia sighed. She reached out and patted my arm. Her touch light and non-committal. She is just grieving. Naomi, you know how she gets. She takes everything so hard. She called me a leech. Mom. Patricia winced. She hates conflict. She hates truth even more. She didn't mean it. She said, please, Naomi, do not provoke her. She has been under so much pressure handling your father's affairs. Just be easy. For once, be easy. That was the family motto. Be easy meant, be silent. Be easy meant, let Elise do what she wants, because the alternative is an explosion. I am staying at the motel on Route 9. I said, call me if you need me. She didn't answer. She was already looking past me, checking to see if Elise was watching us. I drove to the motel. The room smelled of lemon polish and stale cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. I felt hollowed out. I had come here hoping for closure, and instead, I had stepped right back into the bear trap. I reached into my purse to get my phone, and my fingers brushed against something thick. I pulled it out. It was a cream-colored envelope. I frowned. I had not put this there. I turned it over. There was no stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in block letters in blue ink. Naomi. I opened it. Inside was a single index card. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. It looked like my father's handwriting, but from 20 years ago, before the tremors started. The note read, Tuesday, 4 o'clock. Do not talk to the old lawyer first. My heart hammered against my ribs. Tuesday, that was today. But it was already 6 o'clock in the evening. The note must have been slipped into my bag at the church. Had I missed the meeting? Or did it mean next Tuesday? And then I saw the date scrawled in the bottom corner. It was for tomorrow. I looked at the phrase again. Do not talk to the old lawyer first. Mr. Henderson wanted me to sign acknowledgments tomorrow morning at 10. The note was warning me. I stood up. The room felt too small. I needed to move. I needed to see something real. I got back in my car and drove to the house. The driveway was lined with cars. I parked on the street and walked up the long, winding path. The house was a sprawling Victorian monster that loomed against the gray sky. The lights were on in every room. I let myself in with the key I had kept on my ring for 10 years. The foyer was full of boxes. Excuse me, a voice said. You cannot be in here. I turned. A young woman in a sharp gray suit was standing by the library door. She held a clipboard. She looked like she was 22 and very efficient. I am Naomi Cook. I said, this is my father's house. The woman blinked. Oh, I am sorry. I didn't realize. I am Sarah, Elise's executive assistant. Elise is not here. I said, no, Sarah said. She is at the reception. She asked me to come over and start organizing the inventory. Inventory. I said, yes, for the estate sale. And the appraisal. Sarah gestured to the boxes. We are separating the items to be donated from the items to be auctioned. I looked around. My father had been dead for 3 days, and Elise was already selling the furniture. I walked past her into the living room. There were small red stickers on the lamps, on the paintings. On the back of the sofa where my father used to sit and read the newspaper, please do not touch anything, Sarah called out nervously. We have to catalog everything for the valuation. I ignored her. I walked through the house, feeling like a ghost. The air smelled of him, cigar smoke, wool, and old paper, but the house was being stripped. It was being erased. Elise was not just selling his things. She was sanitizing the space. She was removing him so she could convert his life into a number on a spreadsheet. I went to the coat closet in the hallway. Sarah was busy typing on her phone in the living room. I opened the closet door. It was full of heavy winter coats. I pushed them aside, burying my face for a second in the rough wool. It smelled like winter. It smelled like safety. I crouched down, at the back of the closet, behind a pair of rubber boots that hadn't been worn in a decade. There was a loose floorboard. I used to hide my diary there when I was 12. I pried it up with my fingernails. It was still there. A small, gray metal box. It was a lockbox. The kind you buy at an office supply store for $20. It was heavy. I pulled it out. It was wrapped in clear plastic, taped shut with excessive care. I tried the lid. Locked. I heard Sarah's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Ms. Cook, are you still here? I shoved the box into my oversized tote bag and stood up. I am leaving. I said. I walked out of the house. I did not look back at Sarah. I did not look at the red stickers. I walked to my car, threw the bag on the passenger seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I drove back to the motel. I double-locked the door. I put the chair under the handle. I was being paranoid. I knew I was being paranoid. But the note, the red stickers, the look in Elise's eyes. I sat on the bed with the metal box in my lap. I shook it. It didn't rattle. Whatever was inside was packed tight. Why had he hidden it? My father had a safe in his study. He had safety deposit boxes. He had lawyers. Why put a $20 box under a floorboard in the coat closet? Because he knew I was the only one who knew about the loose board. I was the one who hid things. Elise never hid anything. She demanded everything be brought to her. My phone buzzed again. I jumped. It was a text message. The number was blocked. I opened it. If you want the truth about the trust, show up alone. Wear a watch. I stared at the screen. Wear a watch. A memory flashed in my mind. My father, sitting at the breakfast table. He always checked his watch before he said something important. It was a reflex. He would glance at his wrist, tap the crystal face twice with his index finger, and then deliver the news. I am selling the summer house. Your mother and I are taking a trip. I am changing the will. He wore a watch even when he was in his pajamas. He wore it in the hospital. He felt naked without time strapped to his wrist. I looked at my own wrist. It was bare. I used my phone for time. I went to my suitcase. In the side pocket, I had an old watch. It was a cheap leather strap with a simple white face. I had bought it for a job interview years ago and never wore it. I had thrown it in the bag by accident. I put it on. The leather was stiff. The ticking sound was loud in the quiet room. I looked at the metal box. I looked at the note telling me not to trust the lawyer. I thought about Elise calling me a leech. Elise thought this was going to be easy. She thought I was the same Naomi who ran away to the city to avoid conflict. She thought she could shout me down, buy me off, or scare me away. She thought she could erase my father and rewrite the history of this family to suit her narrative. I walked to the small desk in the corner of the room. I took out a notebook and a pen. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. I wrote, Elise called me a leech. Mr. Henderson is hiding papers. The house is being liquidated. I was not going to run. I was not going to cry. I was going to observe. I was going to document. Something about the timing felt planned. My father dying right before the quarter ended. The lawyer rushing the paperwork. The stranger knowing I needed a watch. I sat there, listening to the rain beat against the window and the steady, rhythmic ticking of the watch on my wrist. I was not a leech. I was a witness. And for the first time in my life, I was going to watch closely. I closed the notebook. I waited for morning. The address on the card did not lead to the dusty wood-paneled office of Henderson and Associates on Main Street. Instead, it led me to a glass monolith in the financial district of the nearest city, 40 minutes south of Maple Hollow. The building was a tower of blue steel and silence, the kind of place where money was not discussed but merely moved, silently and in vast quantities. Across fiber optic cables, I arrived 15 minutes early. I was wearing the only other suit I owned, a navy blue blazer that had seen better days and a pair of trousers that I had ironed on the motel bed that morning. I felt small. I felt like I was walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was smooth enough to be unsettling. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a lobby that smelled of white tea and aggressive minimalism. The reception desk was a slab of raw marble. The name on the wall behind it was not a law firm. It read simply, Arden Fiduciary Group. I gave my name to the receptionist, a young man with skin like porcelain. He did not ask me to take a seat. He pressed a button under the desk, and a set of frosted glass double doors buzzed open. Ms. Cook, he said. Mr. Arden is expecting you. Conference room B. I walked down a hallway lined with abstract art that looked like violence captured in charcoal. Mr. Henderson, the family attorney, was already there. He was sitting at a long table made of dark walnut, looking profoundly uncomfortable. His briefcase was on his lap, clutching it like a flotation device. When I entered, he jumped. Naomi, he said. He sounded breathless. I did not know this was happening here. I thought we were meeting at the house. This is highly irregular. I sat across from him. The chair was leather, cold and expensive. I'm just following instructions. Mr. Henderson, I said. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. I have been your father's attorney for 30 years. I drafted the will. I do not understand why an outside administrator is involved. Elise is going to be furious. He said her name with a mixture of reverence and terror. Elise was late. It was a power move. I knew it. She knew it. The clock on the wall, a sleek, numberless disc, ticked past 10 o'clock. Then 10:15. Mr. Henderson checked his phone 4 times. I just sat there, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, listening to the silence. At 10:22, the doors swung open. Elise did not apologize. She walked in as if the meeting could not possibly have started without her. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that looked like it would stain if you even thought about dirt. Her heels clicked a sharp, military rhythm on the polished floor. "What is this place?" she asked. She did not look at me. She looked at Mr. Henderson. "Why are we not at your office? This is incredibly inconvenient. I have a luncheon at noon." Mr. Henderson scrambled to stand up. "Elise, I apologize. I was told to come here as well. I am just as in the dark as you are." Elise sighed, a sound of profound irritation. She dropped her purse onto the table, the heavy hardware clanking against the wood. "Well, let us get on with it," she said. "I have read the draft. I just need to sign the release for the liquid assets. I have vendors waiting for deposits for the estate sale." She finally looked at me. Her gaze was flat, bored. "Hello. Naomi. I am surprised you found the place." I did not answer. I checked my watch. The cheap leather strap felt tight against my wrist. The door at the far end of the room opened. A man walked in. He was not what I expected. He was tall, thin, and moved with a terrifying economy of motion. He wore a black suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. He carried no briefcase, no stack of disorganized papers. He carried only a single, slender black folder. He walked to the head of the table and stood there. He did not smile. He did not offer a hand to shake. "Good morning," he said. His voice was low, resonant, and completely devoid of warmth. "I am Miles Arden." Elise waved a hand dismissively. "Yes, yes." "You are the associate handling the filing. Look, Mr. Arden, we are in a hurry. Just give me the signature pages. Mr. Henderson can walk you through the details later." Miles Arden did not blink. He placed the black folder on the table. He sat down. "I am not an associate, Mrs. Vanity," he said, "and I am not a lawyer." Elise froze. She hated being called by her married name when she was in business mode. She preferred to wield our father's name like a club. "Excuse me?" she said. "I am a professional trustee," Miles said. "I represent the Arden Fiduciary Group. We have been appointed as the sole administrative entity for the James Cook Revocable Trust. Mr. Henderson is here today as a courtesy, representing the historic interests of the estate, but he has no authority over the assets." The room went dead silent. Mr. Henderson looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. Elise laughed. It was a brittle, dangerous sound. "That is ridiculous. My father never mentioned a trustee. I am the executor. It is in the will. The will covers personal effects and non-trust assets," Miles said calmly, "which amount to approximately $10,000 in a checking account and a used sedan. Everything else, the properties, the investment portfolios, the life insurance policies, the business holdings, was transferred into the trust 6 months ago, and I am the trustee." Elise slammed her hand on the table. "This is fraud," she snapped. "Naomi put you up to this. She manipulated him. She turned on me." Her eyes wild. "How did you do it?" she demanded. "You were never there. You did not do anything for Dad. I was the one driving him to appointments. I was the one managing the house. I was the one who sacrificed my career to take care of him. And you think you can just swoop in and hire some shark to steal it?" I kept my hands folded in my lap. I felt my heart racing, but I forced my face to remain blank. I have never met Mr. Arden before today. I said quietly, "She is lying." Elise shouted. She looked at Mr. Henderson. "Do something. Tell him this is illegal." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat weakly. "Elise, actually, a trust supersedes the will. If James moved the assets—" Miles Arden raised a hand. It was a small gesture, but it silenced the room instantly. "The trust was established by your father, Mrs. Vanity, specifically to ensure the longevity of the estate." He was very clear about his intentions. Miles opened the folder. He took out 2 single sheets of paper and slid one to Elise and one to me. "This is a summary of the distribution schedule," he said. Elise snatched the paper. Her eyes scanned it frantically. "What is this?" she whispered. "What is Phase 1? "The trust is conditional," Miles said. He spoke as if he were reading the weather report. "There are no lump sum payouts. Distributions will occur in 3 phases over the course of 5 years. Each phase requires a compliance review and a solvency audit of the beneficiaries." "Compliance review?" Elise spat the words out. "I am 40 years old. I am not a child asking for an allowance. This is my money. It is the trust's money." Miles corrected. "This is insulting." Elise said. She threw the paper down. "I will not accept this. I want the full amount transferred to my account by the end of the week, or I will sue this firm into the ground. Do you know who my husband is? Do you know who I know in this city?" Miles Arden looked at her. He did not look impressed. He looked bored. "Litigation is your right, Mrs. Vanity," he said. "However, the trust includes a no-contest clause. If you file a lawsuit challenging the validity of the trust, you will be automatically disinherited. You will receive nothing." Elise's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Mr. Henderson, but he was staring at his shoes. I looked at the paper in front of me. The numbers were staggering, even divided into phases. It was more money than I had ever seen. But it was the text at the bottom that caught my eye. Beneficiary B, Naomi Cook. Status, co-beneficiary with oversight rights. I frowned. "Mr. Arden," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "What does oversight rights mean?" Elise whipped her head around. "What?" Miles turned to me. For the first time, his expression softened. "Just a fraction. Your father was concerned about transparency. Ms. Cook, as the co-beneficiary with oversight rights, you are entitled to review all financial records of the trust administration. You have the right to audit the distribution requests of other beneficiaries to ensure they align with the trust's stated purpose. You may request bank statements, expense reports, and communication logs regarding the estate's assets." The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed down on the room. Elise went pale. It was not the anger of a woman denied money. It was the terror of a woman who had left a door unlocked. "She can audit me?" Elise whispered. "She can audit the trust," Miles said. "If the trust pays for something on your behalf, she can see the receipt." "No," Elise said. She stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Absolutely not. She is unstable. She has a history of mental health issues. She is vindictive. I will not have my sister digging through my life. Then do not ask the trust for money," Miles said simply. Elise stared at him. Her chest was heaving. She looked trapped. She looked like an animal that had walked into a cage expecting a meal and heard the door slam shut. "You tricked him," she hissed at me. "You poisoned him against me. You made him think I was—" "What, a thief?" I looked up at her. I remembered the red stickers on the furniture. I remembered the way her assistant had looked at me in the house. I did not do anything. "Elise," I said, "I just showed up." "You are a liar," she screamed. She grabbed her purse. "I am not signing anything. I am going to call the senator. I am going to have your license, Mr. Arden. And you—" She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You will regret this. I will make sure everyone knows what you are. I will make sure you cannot walk down the street in Maple Hollow without people spitting on you." She stormed out. The glass doors buzzed open and shut. The silence returned. Mr. Henderson stood up. He looked gray. I should go check on her. He stammered. Sit down, Mr. Henderson. Miles said. It was not a request. Mr. Henderson sat. Miles turned to me. He closed the folder. Mrs. Cook, he said, do you have any questions? I looked at the black folder. I looked at the man who had just dismantled my sister with a few sheets of paper. Why? I asked. Why did he do it this way? Miles rested his hands on the table. He had long fingers, precise and still. Your father anticipated that the transition would be volatile. He wanted to ensure that the estate was protected. He wanted to ensure that the truth was preserved. He slid a business card across the table. It was heavy black cardstock with gold lettering. There is a sealed directive, Miles said. I blinked. A what? A separate document? Miles said. It is currently in the vault. It is to be opened only after the first compliance review is completed, 6 months from now, or it can be opened sooner if certain conditions are met. What conditions? I asked. Miles paused. He looked at Mr. Henderson, then back at me. If the integrity of the trust is compromised, he said, or if the oversight beneficiary, that is you, uncovers evidence of malfeasance prior to the death of the grantor. Malfeasance, I repeated. Fraud, Miles said. Theft, undue influence. I felt a chill run down my spine. My father didn't just leave money. He left a trap. He knew Elise would try to take everything. He knew she would try to erase me. So he gave me the one thing she couldn't fight, the right to watch. I would like to request a basic accounting. I said, I want to see the records from the last 6 months of his life. Mr. Henderson made a squeaking noise. Naomi, really, is that necessary? The medical expenses were high. Elise had to manage a lot of... Mr. Henderson is not authorized to speak for the trust, Miles said, cutting him off. His voice was like a guillotine. Miles looked at me. I will have the digital records sent to you by secure server this afternoon, he said. Thank you. I said. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. One more thing. Ms. Cook, Miles said. I turned at the door. Ms. Vanity is a resourceful woman, he said. She is accustomed to controlling the narrative. You should be prepared for turbulence. I nodded. I know. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the city. I felt dizzy. I had walked in expecting to be told I was getting $5,000 and a box of old books. I had walked out with the keys to a war. By the time I got to my car, my phone was vibrating. It started with a text from my Aunt Sarah. Naomi, I just heard from Elise. I am heartbroken. How could you try to cut your sister out of the will, after everything she did for your father? Then a message from my cousin Mike. Real classy. Naomi, coming back just for the cash. We all see you. Then a Facebook notification, a post from Elise, no names, just a vague, tragic paragraph about betrayal and greed and protecting Dad's legacy from those who abandoned him. It already had 200 likes. I sat in the driver's seat of my Corolla and watched the messages roll in. Elise worked fast. She had taken the truth, that our father had put checks on her power, and twisted it into a lie where I was the villain manipulating a dying man. She was isolating me. She was making sure that if I spoke up, no one would believe me. She was painting me as the greedy, unstable sister so that when the audit happened, she could claim I was just being vindictive. I put the phone in the glove box. I did not reply. I drove. I did not go back to Maple Hollow. I drove south, toward the city where I lived, toward the small, quiet life I had built. I needed to see Dr. Evans. I had been seeing Dr. Evans for 3 years. She was a woman of 60 with kind eyes and a ruthlessly logical mind. She was the one who had helped me understand that I was not responsible for my family's dysfunction. She was the one who taught me that no was a complete sentence. I sat on her beige couch, clutching a throw pillow. I told her everything, the funeral, the Leech comment, the red stickers, the meeting with Miles Arden, the text messages filling up my phone. I am afraid. I said, "What are you afraid of?" she asked. Her voice was calm. a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I am afraid that she is right. I said, I am afraid that I am just causing trouble. Maybe I should just sign the waiver. Maybe I should just let her have it. I don't want the money. I just want— You want the truth, Doctor, Evans said. Yes, and you are afraid that if you fight her, you will become the person she says you are. She said, You are afraid of being the problem child again. I nodded. Tears pricked my eyes. It was the oldest wound, the feeling that any need I had, any voice I raised, was an inconvenience to the family system. Elise was the star. I was the audience. If the audience interrupted the play, they were removed. Naomi. Doctor, Evans said, You are not a child anymore. You are a woman with a legal right to know what happened to your father. Elise is reacting with rage because she is losing control. That is not your fault. That is her consequence. But everyone believes her. I said, The whole town, my family, let them— She said, You cannot control the story she tells. You can only control the evidence you find. She leaned forward. Why did he give you oversight rights? She asked. I thought about it. I thought about the metal box I still hadn't opened. I thought about the note. Because he knew I would look, I said. Elise never looks. She just assumes she deserves. He knew I would check the math. Then honor that. Doctor, Evans said, do not fight her. Just check the math. I left her office feeling lighter, not happy, but grounded. I had a job to do. I was not a leech. I was an auditor. I drove to my apartment. It was a small one-bedroom on the third floor of a walk-up. It was quiet. It smelled of vanilla candles and safety. I threw my keys on the counter and checked my mail. I had been gone for 3 days. The mailbox was full of flyers and bills. But there was one package. It was a small, padded envelope. It was wrapped in brown paper. There was no return address. The postage label had been printed from a self-service kiosk. I took it into the kitchen. I used a steak knife to slit the tape. I tipped the envelope upside down. Something heavy and gold slid out onto the counter with a dull clunk. My breath hitched. It was a watch, but not just any watch. It was a Patek Philippe. Gold, with a leather strap worn soft by decades of use. The crystal was scratched in the corner near the 7. It was my father's watch, the one he wore every single day, the one he checked before he told me he was disappointed in me, the one he checked before he told me he loved me. I picked it up. It was still ticking. It had been wound recently. I turned it over. On the back, there was an engraving. I had never seen it before. It looked fresh, the metal bright against the dull gold of the case. Time is truth. I stared at it. Elise had been selling the furniture. She had been inventorying the silver. She would have torn the house apart looking for this watch. It was worth thousands of dollars. But someone had taken it. Someone had walked out of that house, bypassed Elise's security, bypassed the red stickers, and mailed it to me. I remembered the text message, "Wear a watch." I looked at the cheap watch on my wrist. I unbuckled it and dropped it in the trash. I put on my father's watch. It was too big. It slid down my forearm, but the weight of it felt anchoring. It felt like armor. I was not alone. Miles Arden was the trustee, but someone else was out there. Someone who knew the secrets. Someone who wanted me to find them. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I logged into my secure email. A notification popped up. New message from Arden Fiduciary Group. Estate Financial Records. Part 1 of 4. I clicked download. The file opened. Columns of numbers, dates, vendor names. I adjusted the watch on my wrist. I pulled up a fresh spreadsheet. I started to read. The digital files from the Arden Fiduciary Group arrived in a steady stream, accumulating on my laptop screen like snowdrifts. I spent 3 nights staring at them, my eyes burning, the heavy gold watch on my wrist ticking away the seconds of my new life. I was not an accountant. I was a library archivist. My job was to organize chaos, to find the narrative thread in a mess of disconnected data. And as I combed through my father's bank statements from the last 6 months, a narrative began to emerge. It was not a story of a sick man getting his affairs in order. It was a story of a siege. The first thing that caught my eye was a recurring payment to a company called Venn Strategy Partners. It started 5 months ago, $10,000, then 2 weeks later, $15,000, then, in the last month of his life, 3 separate payments of $20,000 each. I looked up Venn Strategy Partners. Their website was a single landing page with a stock photo of a glass building and a vague mission statement about holistic wealth management. No team page, no address other than a P.O. box in the city. I dug deeper. I cross-referenced the name with the contacts on my father's email server, which Miles had provided. There was no correspondence. My father, a man who documented every contractor who fixed a leaky faucet, had paid nearly $90,000 to a consulting firm he had never emailed. I searched the company name on social media. Nothing. Then I searched the registered agent. It led back to a man named Carter Baines. I knew that name. Carter Baines was the husband of Elise's best friend, frantic socialite terrified of aging named Margot. Carter was a failed real estate developer who spent most of his time golfing at the club where Elise was the chair of the social committee. My father despised Carter Baines. He had once called him a man with a hollow handshake. So why was my father paying Carter's shell company $90,000 in consulting fees while he was dying? I needed to go back to Maple Hollow. I drove up on a Thursday morning, parking my car 3 streets away from my father's house to avoid being seen by Elise's estate sale organizers. I walked to the house next door, a small cottage overrun with ivy. Mrs. Higgins had lived next to us for 40 years. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and spent her days gardening and watching the street. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Naomi," she said. She wiped her hands on her apron. "I was wondering when you would come." She made me tea. We sat in her sunroom, which smelled of lavender and damp earth. I could see the side of my father's house through the window. A white van was parked in the driveway. Men were loading boxes. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, "did you notice anything strange over there in the last few months?" She blew on her tea. She looked out the window. "Strange is a polite word for it." She said, "It was like a train station, but only at certain times." "What do you mean?" "Your father was sick, Naomi. He stopped going out, but people started coming in. Men in suits, not doctors. They carried briefcases. They would come in the middle of the day, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Did you recognize them?" I asked. "No, but I noticed the pattern. They would arrive at 1 o'clock. They would stay for an hour, and they would always leave exactly 10 minutes before Elise's car pulled into the driveway." I set my cup down. "Before Elise arrived, every time." Mrs. Higgins said, "It was like a dance. The suits go out the back. Elise comes in the front. She would stay for dinner. She brought him food. She looked like the perfect daughter. But those men, they looked like vultures. Did Elise know they were there?" Mrs. Higgins hesitated. "One day, about 3 weeks ago, one of the men was late leaving. Elise pulled in early. I saw them meet in the driveway. I thought she would be upset. You know, a stranger in her sick father's house. What happened?" She hugged him. Mrs. Higgins said. She laughed. It looked like they were celebrating. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins." I drove away feeling sick. Elise wasn't just controlling the estate after his death. She had been managing the access before he died. She had been running a traffic control operation, ensuring that whoever these men were, they had access to him when he was vulnerable, and she was there to smooth it over. My phone rang. It was Elise. Her picture on my screen, a smiling selfie from a vacation we took 10 years ago, felt like a mockery. I answered, "Naomi." She said, her voice was bright, airy. It was her public voice. "I am in the city for a fitting. Let us have lunch. We need to clear the air." I looked at the watch on my wrist. Time is truth. "Okay," I said. "Where?" "The Obsidian Room, 1 o'clock. Do not be late." The Obsidian Room was the kind of restaurant where the water menu had prices. It was all dark velvet and hushed conversations. Elise was already seated at a corner booth, wearing a pair of sunglasses indoors. She took them off when I sat down. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I ordered a salad. She ordered a bottle of Sancerre. "I am sorry about the funeral," she said. She reached across the table to touch my hand. I pulled it back. She didn't flinch. I was just so emotional. "You know how much I loved him. It has been so hard. Naomi, dealing with the house, the memories." She took a long sip of wine. "And this trustee business," she continued. "It is just unnecessary stress. Mr. Henderson is heartbroken. He feels like Dad didn't trust him. Dad didn't trust anyone. Apparently," I said. Elise laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "No. He was getting paranoid at the end. The dementia." "He didn't have dementia." "Elise," I said. "His death certificate said heart failure. It was starting." She insisted. She waved her hand. "Look, Naomi, I have been thinking. This oversight role you have, it is going to be a burden. You have your job. You have your life. You do not want to spend the next 5 years reading boring financial reports and fighting with lawyers." I waited. "I want to make you an offer," she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. She didn't write a check. She just placed her hand on it. "I will give you a cash buyout. Today, right now, I will write you a personal check for $200,000. In exchange, you sign a waiver resigning as the oversight beneficiary and assigning your interest to me. $200,000. It was a lot of money. To the old Naomi, it would have been life-changing, but I knew the estate was worth millions, and more importantly, I knew about Ven's strategy partners. "Is that what you think my silence is worth?" I asked. Elise sighed. She looked at me with pity. "Naomi, be realistic. The trust distribution is over 5 years. Inflation, legal fees, taxes. By the time you actually see that money, it will be nothing. This is clean. This is immediate. You can go back to your life. You can buy a house. You can be free of this toxic family." She leaned in. "And we can be sisters again," she said softly. "I miss you. Naomi, I do not want to fight." For a second, I almost believed her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted the sister who used to braid my hair, not this shark in a silk blouse. But then I saw it, a tiny bead of sweat on her upper lip. Her hand, resting on the checkbook, was pressing down too hard. Her knuckles were white. She wasn't offering me peace. She was buying my blindness. $200,000, I said slowly. That is the exact amount of the liquid assets in the checking account. The one Miles said I had no claim to. You are offering me my own inheritance to stop looking at yours. Elise's face hardened. The mask slipped. "Take the money." "Naomi, no." Elise slammed her glass down. Wine sloshed onto the white tablecloth. "You are making a mistake," she hissed. "I am auditing the records. Elise, I found the payments to Ven's strategy partners. I know about Carter Baines." Elise went still. Her eyes went wide, then narrow. "You do not know what you are talking about. $90,000 in consulting fees." I said, "For what? Strategy sessions? In the living room? While Mrs. Higgins watched men come and go?" Elise laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound. "People turned to look at us. You think you are so smart," she said. "You think you found a smoking gun? Those were legitimate business expenses. Dad was looking into investments. Dad was dying." I said. Elise leaned across the table. Her face was twisted with something that looked like hate, but smelled like fear. "Listen to me, you little leech. If you do not sign that waiver, I will bury you. I will drag this out in probate for 10 years. I will drain every cent of the trust in legal defense fees. I will sue you for harassment. I will make sure you lose your job, your reputation, and your mind." She picked up her purse. "Take the deal. Naomi, last chance." I looked at her. I checked my watch. "No," I said. Elise stood up. She threw a $100 bill on the table. "You will regret this," she said. She walked out. I sat there, shaking, watching the stain of the wine spread across the tablecloth like blood. She was panicking. "You do not offer a $200,000 bribe if you are annoyed. You offer it if you are terrified." I went back to the records. I needed to understand the mechanism. How had she done it? My father was stubborn. He controlled his own checkbook. I looked at the household payroll. For 10 years, my father had employed a housekeeper named Maria. Maria was loyal. She was protective. I looked at the payroll records from 6 months ago. Maria's payments stopped on October 15th. On October 16th, a new payee appeared, Premier Staffing Solutions. I searched Premier Staffing. It was a subsidiary of a holding company called Venn Group. It was the same circle. Elise had fired Maria. She had replaced her with agency staff provided by the same shell company she was funneling money to. Why? Because Maria would never have let Carter Baines and his lawyers into the house. Maria would have called me. Elise had to clear the board before she could make her move. She had isolated him. She had replaced his protectors with her operatives. I needed legal advice, but I couldn't ask Mr. Henderson. He was compromised. I emailed Miles Arden. I need to see you. He met me at a coffee shop near the train station. He wore a gray suit this time, but the effect was the same. He looked like a weapon kept in a velvet case. I told him about the lunch. I told him about the bribe. I told him about Venn's strategy and the staffing agency. I sat back, expecting him to be shocked. Miles took a sip of his black coffee. He did not look shocked. It follows the pattern, he said. You knew? I asked. I suspected. He said, the forensic accounting team flagged the Venn payments during the initial intake. We are currently verifying the deliverables. If there are no deliverables, no reports, no strategy documents, then it is fraud. So we can stop her? I asked. We can remove her as a beneficiary? Miles looked at me. His eyes were gray and unyielding. Ms. Cook, you need to understand what you are starting. If you allege fraud, the burden of proof is on you. Elise will not just defend herself. She will counterattack. She has resources. She has social capital. She will paint you as a disgruntled, estranged daughter trying to sabotage her grieving sister. She already is. I said, it will get worse. Miles said, she will target your finances. She will target your mental health history. She will try to break you before we even get to a courtroom. Are you prepared for that? I touched the watch on my wrist. I thought about my father, alone in that house, surrounded by strangers paid to manipulate him. She called me a leech. I said, she projected everything she is onto me. I am not doing this for the money. Miles, I am doing this because she thinks she won. Miles nodded, a very small, very terrifying nod. Then you need the smoking gun, he said. Consulting fees are suspicious, but they can be explained away as bad judgment. You need evidence of coercion. You need a signature. He slid a piece of paper across the table. This was found in the safe deposit box yesterday. He said, it is a loan guarantee. I picked it up. It was a document guaranteeing a business loan for $2 million. The borrower was Venn Development, LLC. The guarantor was James Cook. The date was 3 weeks before he died. I looked at the signature. It was shaky. It trailed off at the end. My father never signed anything without reading it 3 times. He never signed guarantees. He preached against debt his entire life. This makes no sense, I said. He wouldn't sign this, unless he was forced, Miles said, or unless he was told it was something else. I stared at the shaky signature. It looked like the hand of a man who was exhausted or drugged. I need the original. I said, it is with the handwriting analysts. Miles said, but there is something else. He hesitated. When we cataloged the safe, we found an inventory list written by your father about a year ago. It listed his assets. It also listed personal items. And item number 42. Miles said, metal lockbox. Location, coat closet. Behind the boots. Key location, the Count of Monte Cristo. I froze. I had the box. It was sitting under my bed in the apartment. I had never found the key. The Count of Monte Cristo. It was his favorite book. He used to read it aloud to me when I was sick. He loved the part about the slow, patient planning of justice. I went home. I tore apart my bookshelf. I had his old copy. He had given it to me when I moved out. I opened it. I shook it. Nothing fell out. I flipped through the pages. There was a photo tucked into the chapter about the escape from the Chateau d'If. It was a picture of me and him on a fishing boat. I was 7. He was laughing, pointing at a fish I had just caught. I pulled the photo out. Taped to the back of the photo, flat and small, was a silver key. My hands were trembling. I pulled the metal box out from under my bed. I set it on the desk. I inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. I opened the lid. The box was mostly empty. There were no stacks of cash, no diamonds. There were just 2 things. A USB drive, labeled with a date, November 12th. That was 2 months before he died. And a handwritten letter. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was stronger here than on the loan guarantee. It was written with purpose. Naomi, if you are reading this, it means you found the box. And if you found the box, it means you didn't trust the lawyer. Good girl. I have made mistakes. The biggest one was thinking I could buy loyalty. I created a monster in your sister, and I ignored the person you were becoming because it was easier to let you drift away than to face the dysfunction in this house. But I am awake now. I see what is happening. The pills they give me make me tired, but they do not make me stupid. I know about the meetings. I know about the loan. I know they are waiting for me to die. I cannot stop them. I am too weak, and she has cut off the phones. But I can ensure that they do not keep what they steal. If Elise calls you a leech, it means she has already taken too much. It is her tell. She accuses you of her own sins. Listen to the drive. Use the watch. Trust the man in the black suit. I am sorry I was not the father you deserved, but I will be the ally you need. Love. Dad. I wiped my eyes. I didn't sob. I felt a fierce, burning heat in my chest. He had seen me. At the very end, he had seen me. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. There were 10 audio files. I clicked on the first one, the sound of static, then the sound of fabric rustling. He must have been hiding a recorder in his robe. Then, my father's voice, raspy, but clear. November 12th, 1 p.m. Meeting with Carter Baines and Elise. A door opened. Hi, Daddy. Elise's voice. Sweet, cloying. Look who stopped by. It's Carter. He has some paperwork for the investment we talked about. I don't want to invest. Elise. My father said, I told you. James. Come on. A man's voice. Oily. It's a formality. The bridge loan is already approved. We just need a guarantor for the underwriting. It's 0 risk. Nothing is 0 risk, my father said. I want to call Henderson. Dad, don't be difficult. Elise's voice changed. It got tighter. Henderson is on vacation. We need to do this today. Carter drove all the way out here. Just sign the paper. Do it for me. After everything I do for you? Elise, I am tired. Then sign it so you can sleep, Elise shouted. The sweetness was gone. Just sign the damn paper. There was a silence, then the sound of a pen scratching on paper. There, my father whispered. Now get out. I clicked to the next file. December 4th. They fired Maria today. Elise said she was stealing silver. I know she wasn't. They brought in a nurse named Brenda. She watches me when I use the phone. I clicked to the last file. It was dated 3 days before he died. I am not leaving money. His voice whispered. It sounded very close to the microphone. I am leaving a trap. Miles knows the structure. The loan is the bait. If they execute the loan against the estate, they trigger the fraud clause in the trust. But Naomi has to find it. Naomi has to pull the trigger. Naomi, if you are listening, do not let them get away with it. Check the time. Watch the money. Take them down. The recording ended. I sat in the silence of my apartment. The city noises outside seemed miles away. I looked at the loan guarantee copy Miles had given me. Elise had bullied a dying man into signing a $2 million guarantee for her friend's shell company. She thought she had secured a fortune, but she hadn't. She had handed me the murder weapon. I closed the laptop. I picked up the phone. I dialed Miles Arden. I have the proof. I said, bring it to me. He said. I hung up. I stood at the window and looked out at the night. Elise wanted a war. She wanted to bury me. I touched the cold glass of the window with my forehead. You should have taken the 200,000. Elise, I whispered, because now, I am going to take everything. The morning after I found the USB drive, I did not go to the police. I did not go to the press. I went to a building in the technology district that looked more like a fortress than an office. Miles Arden had given me the name of the firm, Blackstone Digital Forensics. He told me they were expensive, discreet, and that their expert testimony had held up in federal court against companies far larger than my sister's social circle. I sat in a windowless room with a man named Dr. Aris. He wore a white lab coat over a band t-shirt, and he handled the USB drive with a pair of tweezers, as if it were a contaminated biological sample. I need authentication. I said, I need to know that these files were created on the dates they say they were. I need to know they have not been altered, spliced, or edited, and I need voice identification analysis to confirm that the speakers are who I say they are. Doctor. Aris looked at the drive, then at me. We look at the metadata, he said. We look at the hex code. If someone so much as sneezed while editing these files, we will see the artifact. We will map the acoustic footprint of the recording device against the ambient noise of the room. If your father was recording this from inside a robe pocket, the frequency attenuation will prove it. How long? I asked. 48 hours for the preliminary report. He said, 5 days for the court-admissible certification. I handed him my credit card. The charge was $5,000. It was nearly all the savings I had left. It is worth it, I told myself. When Elise hears these recordings, her first move will be to claim they are fake. She will say I hired an actor. She will say I used AI. She will say I spent 6 months constructing a digital lie. I needed the science to be the shield that broke her sword. I walked out of Blackstone with a receipt and a copy of the chain of custody form. I felt a temporary surge of control. I was moving pieces on the board. I was not just reacting anymore, but Elise was not waiting for my move. She was making her own. I arrived home at 6 o'clock that evening. A man was sitting on the steps of my apartment building. He was not a neighbor. He was wearing a windbreaker and holding a large manila envelope. Naomi Cook? He asked. Yes. You have been served. He thrust the envelope into my hands and walked away before I could even blink. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat on my couch and tore open the envelope. It was a legal filing. Emergency petition to suspend beneficiary rights and restrain harassment. I read the first page, then the second. My hands started to shake, rattling the paper. Elise had filed an emergency motion in probate court. The allegations were breathtaking in their cruelty and their creativity. Petitioner Elise Vanity alleges that beneficiary Naomi Cook has engaged in a pattern of harassment against the estate trustees and administrators. Petitioner alleges that Naomi Cook is mentally unstable and has a history of delusional episodes regarding family finances. Petitioner asserts that Naomi Cook is disturbing the orderly administration of the James Cook Revocable Trust by making frivolous demands for documentation, harassing third-party vendors, and threatening litigation to extort a settlement. It was a masterclass in projection. Every single thing Elise was doing to me, she had accused me of doing to her. She had taken my legitimate questions about the Venn strategy payments and framed them as the ravings of a greedy, mentally ill woman. She was asking the court to strip me of my oversight rights immediately. She was asking for a restraining order to prevent me from contacting vendors, which meant she was trying to block me from talking to the people she had paid off. I put the papers down on the coffee table. I felt a wave of nausea. This was how she won. She didn't win with facts. She won with volume. She won by flooding the zone with so much noise, so much paper, so many accusations, that the truth got buried under the sheer weight of the conflict. She was betting that I would break. She was betting that I would look at the legal fees required to fight this petition and retreat. She was betting that I was still the little sister who just wanted everyone to get along. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I forced myself to drink it. I am not that little sister anymore, I said to the empty room. The next morning, the war followed me to work. I worked at a university archive, a place of dust and quiet and respectful whispers. It was my sanctuary. I loved the smell of old paper and the orderliness of the cataloging system. I was at my desk, scanning a collection of letters from the 19th century, when my supervisor, Helen, appeared in the doorway. Helen was a soft-spoken woman who wore cardigans and disliked confrontation. She looked pale. "Naomi," she said, "can you come to my office? And bring your things." My stomach dropped. "Bring your things?" That was code for "you are not coming back to this desk." I followed her down the hall. We went into the HR director's office. A woman I barely knew named Karen was sitting behind the desk. She had a stack of papers in front of her. "Please sit down." "Naomi," Karen said. I sat. "We received some emails this morning." Karen said, "They were sent to the general inbox, the dean's office, and the head of the library board." She slid the papers across the desk. I looked at them. They were printouts of emails sent from an anonymous account. The subject line was, "Concern regarding employee Naomi Cook. To whom it may concern. I am writing to inform you of a serious security risk regarding your employee, Naomi Cook. It has come to our attention that Ms. Cook is currently involved in a severe financial dispute and is suffering from significant mental health instability. She is in extreme debt and has been exhibiting erratic behavior. Given her access to valuable archival materials, we believe she poses a risk of theft or damage. Please consider this a formal warning." I stared at the words. Risk of theft. Elise was trying to get me fired. She was trying to cut off my income so I couldn't afford a lawyer. She was trying to destroy my reputation so that if I testified in court, she could point to my employment record and say, "See? Even her job thinks she is a thief." It was scorched earth. I looked up at Karen. My eyes were dry. The cold anger I had felt at the funeral was back, harder and sharper than before. "This is a lie," I said. My voice was steady. "Naomi," Karen said gently, "these are serious allegations. If you are in financial trouble—" "I am not in financial trouble," I said. "I am the co-beneficiary of a multi-million-dollar trust. My father died 2 weeks ago. My sister is currently attempting to defraud the estate, and I caught her. This email is retaliation. It is an attempt to intimidate me." Karen and Helen exchanged a look. "You are suggesting your sister sent this?" Helen asked. "I am stating it," I said. I looked at the header of the email. It was sent from a secure, encrypted service, but the language, erratic behavior, instability, it is the exact same language she used in a court filing yesterday. I reached into my bag and pulled out the legal petition I had been served the night before. I slammed it onto the desk. "Read this," I said. Paragraph 4. Petitioner alleges Naomi Cook is mentally unstable. Compare it to the email. It is the same author. Karen picked up the legal document. She read it. Her eyebrows went up. "I am currently conducting a forensic audit of the estate." I said, "I have uncovered evidence of fraud. My sister is trying to destroy my credibility and my livelihood to stop me. I will not let her use this university as a weapon in her personal war." I took a breath. "I am happy to submit to a background check." I said, "I am happy to show you my bank accounts. I have zero debt. I have never stolen a paperclip, let alone an archival document, but I need you to support me right now. I am being targeted." The room was silent for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked. Karen put the papers down. "I believe you," she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. However, she said, "This creates a complication. The board is risk-averse. Until this is resolved, I cannot be fired for being the victim of harassment." I said, "No," Karen said, "but we can place you on paid administrative leave, for your own protection, and ours. Paid leave. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat. It meant I kept my salary. It meant I kept my health insurance." "Thank you," I said. I gathered my things. I walked out of the library with my head high, but inside, I was shaking. Elise had reached into my sanctuary. Nowhere was safe. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one, but I needed to secure my flanks. I needed to talk to my mother. I drove to Maple Hollow. I did not go to the house. I called my mother and told her to meet me at the diner on the edge of town. The one where we used to go for pancakes after church when I was a kid. She arrived 10 minutes late. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were darting around the room as if she expected a sniper. "Naomi," she whispered as she sat down. "We shouldn't be meeting. Elise is in a state." I ordered coffee. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to be polite, to be quiet, to be good. "Mom," I said, "why was Maria fired?" Patricia froze. She busied herself with her napkin. "Oh, Naomi, Elise said she was stealing. Did you see her steal?" I asked. "Well, no," Patricia said, "but Elise said items were missing. The silver serving spoons, some crystal." "Mom," I said, "Dad's note says Maria was fired because she wouldn't let Elise's friends into the house." Patricia looked up. Her face was pale. "Dad's note?" "I found a letter." I said, "From Dad." He knew what was happening. He knew Elise was isolating him. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. She reached for my hand, but I didn't take it. "Naomi, please, you have to understand. Your father was confused at the end. He made things up. He didn't make up the loan guarantee." I said, "He didn't make up the $90,000 paid to Carter Baines's shell company, and he didn't make up the fact that you let it happen." Patricia flinched as if I had slapped her. "I couldn't stop her," she cried. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. "You were not there. Naomi, you were in the city. Elise was there every day. She handled the doctors. She handled the bills. If I tried to argue with her, she would threaten to leave. She would say, 'Fine, Mom, you do it.' And I couldn't. I couldn't take care of him by myself." She began to sob, weeping into her napkin. I needed her. Patricia wept. "I need her now. She pays for everything. Naomi, the club dues, the car lease, the maintenance on the cottage. Your father tied all the money up in that trust, and I have nothing. Elise is the only one who makes sure I'm taken care of." I sat there and watched her cry. I felt a profound, aching grief. I had spent my whole life waiting for my mother to stand up for me. I had thought she was a victim of Elise's bullying, just like I was. But she wasn't a victim. She was a collaborator. She had traded her morality for comfort. She had let Elise fire the loyal housekeeper and bring in strangers to drug her husband, all because she was afraid of losing her country club membership and her lease payments. "She is buying you, Mom," I said quietly, "just like she tried to buy me." Patricia looked up, her mascara running. "Please, Naomi, just stop this. Just sign the papers. Let her have it. It is just money. Why do you have to destroy the family for money?" "It is not about the money," I said. "It is about the fact that she killed him. Maybe not with a gun, but she hastened his death. She stressed him into heart failure to get a signature. And you watched." I stood up. I put a $10 bill on the table for the coffee. "I am not stopping." I said. I walked out of the diner. I did not look back. I had lost my mother that day. But I had found my clarity. I was truly alone now. Just me, the watch, and the truth. I went back to the data. I had the what, the payments to Ven's strategy. I had the who, Carter Baines. Now I needed the where and the when. I opened the spreadsheet of payments again. October 12th, $20,000. October 24th, $20,000. November 2nd, $20,000. I opened the folder of gate logs that Miles had sent me. The community where my father lived had a guard shack. Every visitor had to be logged. I cross-referenced the dates. On October 12th, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a visitor was logged in. C. Baines. On October 24th, at 1:30, C. Baines. On November 2nd, at 1 o'clock, C. Baines. And on every single one of those days. Another car was logged in exactly 10 minutes after Carter Baines left. E. Vanity. It was the pattern Mrs. Higgins had seen, the dance. Carter went in, applied the pressure, got the signature or the agreement, and left. Then Elise arrived to play the savior, to smooth the feathers, to make sure the narrative was controlled. But there was one entry that stood out. November 12th, the date of the recording on the USB drive. On November 12th, Carter Baines did not log in at the gate. I frowned. How did he get in? I looked at the log again. November 12th, 12:45 p.m., Premier Staffing Van, the agency. He didn't drive his car. He came in the van with the hired nurses. He smuggled himself in so there would be no record of his visit on the day they forced the signature for the loan guarantee. It was premeditated. It was a conspiracy. But I needed a witness. The gate logs were good, but they were circumstantial. I needed someone who saw him inside the house. I needed Maria. Finding Maria was not easy. Elise had scrubbed her from the household contacts. But I remembered that Maria had a niece who worked at the bakery on 4th Street. I went to the bakery. I bought a loaf of bread. I asked about Maria. The niece looked frightened. She doesn't want to talk to anyone from the family. She said, "Tell her it is Naomi." I said, "Tell her I know she didn't steal the silver. Tell her I know about the safe that evening." My phone rang. "Hello?" A hesitant voice. "Maria." I said, "Ms. Naomi." She said, her voice broke. "I am so sorry about your father." "I know." "Maria, I know you loved him. They wouldn't let me say goodbye." She said, "Mrs. Elise." "She told everyone I was a thief. I have never stolen a penny in my life. I can't get work. Ms. Naomi, the agency blacklisted me." I gripped the phone. Elise had destroyed this woman's livelihood just to get her out of the way. "Maria," I said, "I am going to fix this. I am going to clear your name. But I need you to help me. I am scared of her." Maria whispered, "She knows people." "I know," I said, "but I have a lawyer, a powerful trustee. He can protect you. I need you to tell me about the safe." There was a long silence. I walked in on her. Maria said, "It was a week before they fired me. Your father was napping. I heard a noise in the study. I thought it was him. I went in. And? It was Mrs. Elise. She was on her knees in front of the wall safe. She was trying numbers. She looked crazy, sweaty. She was cursing. Did she see you?" "Yes." She jumped up. She screamed at me. She asked me if I knew the combination. I told her no. Only Mr. James knew it. "What did she say?" "She said, 'He is not in his right mind. He is hiding things from me. I need to protect him.' Then she looked at me, real cold. She said, 'If you tell anyone you saw this, I will make sure you never work in this town again.' And then the men started coming. Maria said, 'The men in the suits.' And then I was fired." "Maria," I said, "will you testify to that? If I bring you into a room with a lawyer and a court reporter, will you say that on the record?" I don't know. If you do?" I said, "I will make sure the trust compensates you for lost wages, and I will make sure you get a glowing reference from the estate." I waited. "Okay," she whispered. "For Mr. James, he was a good man." "Thank you." "Maria, I called Miles Arden. I have the witness." I said, "And I have the gate logs proving Baines used the staffing van to bypass security." "Good," Miles said. His voice was crisp. "Because we have a date." "A date?" "The compliance review," Miles said. "I have formally scheduled it for next Friday at 10 o'clock. It is mandatory. Elise has to attend." "Did she agree?" "She filed an objection," Miles said, "but the judge denied her emergency petition for a restraining order this morning. He ruled that beneficiary oversight is a fundamental term of the trust. She has to show up, Naomi, or she forfeits her interest." I felt a surge of triumph. The judge had read through her lies. Miles continued, "However, you need to be prepared. This meeting will be hostile. She will bring her entire legal team. She will try to provoke you. She will try to make you look emotional." "I won't be emotional," I said. "And Naomi?" "Yes? If we present this evidence, if we prove the fraud, the sealed directive, it opens. I know. It might not be what you think." Miles said, "Your father's justice was specific. I trust him." I said. I hung up. Next Friday, 7 days. I spent the week preparing. I didn't go to work. I sat in my apartment and built the case file. I created a timeline. October 12th. Baines visit. Check 1204 issued. October 24th. Baines visit. Check 1209 issued. November 12th. Baines enters via van. Loan guarantee signed. Father's audio recording. December 4th. Maria fired. Premier staffing takes over. It was a straight line. It was a noose. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my father's watch on my wrist. I listened to the ticking. I opened my journal. I wrote down the title of the page. What I want. I thought about Elise. I thought about her calling me a leech. I thought about the anonymous emails. I thought about my mother crying in the diner. I didn't want their money. I didn't want to live in the big house. I want the truth on the record. I wrote, I want my father's name cleared of the bad debt. I want Maria's reputation restored. I want Elise to hear the word no, and have it mean something. It wasn't about revenge. Revenge was dirty. Revenge was emotional. This was about hygiene. It was about cleaning the wound so it could finally heal. I looked at the watch. Time is truth. Tomorrow. The time would finally run out for Elise. I closed the journal. I laid out my clothes for the morning. A black suit, sharp, professional. The conference room at Arden Fiduciary Group was designed to make you feel small. The walls were glass, floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the city that made the people down on the sidewalk look like insects. The table was a slab of polished black granite that seemed to stretch for miles. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested the preservation of meat. I sat on one side of the granite slab. Next to me was Arthur Vance, the attorney I had hired 3 days ago. Arthur was not flashy. He did not wear a bespoke suit or a watch that cost as much as a car. He was a man in his 60s with a frayed collar and eyes that had seen everything. He was a probate litigator who specialized in fraud. He smelled of peppermint and old books. I looked down at my hands. They were resting on the cool stone of the table. They were steady. On my left wrist, the heavy gold weight of my father's Patek Philippe pressed against my skin. I had wound it that morning. I could feel the mechanical heartbeat of it, ticking against my pulse. Time is truth. At the head of the table sat Miles Arden. He was reading a file, his face a mask of professional indifference. To his right sat a court reporter, a woman with a small, terrifyingly efficient typing machine. She was ready to transcribe every stutter, every lie, every intake of breath. The door opened at exactly 10 o'clock. Elise did not just enter, she invaded. She was flanked by 3 men in matching charcoal suits. They moved in a wedge formation, like Secret Service agents protecting a head of state. Behind them walked a woman I recognized, Mrs. Sterling, the president of the Maple Hollow Garden Club, a woman who had spent 40 years perfecting the art of the backhanded compliment. She was Elise's character witness. Elise wore white. It was a strategic choice. She looked like a martyr. She looked like the grieving, innocent daughter who was being persecuted by the system. She stopped at the table and looked at me. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. "You actually showed up," she said. Her lead attorney, a man with a tan so deep it looked painful, placed a briefcase on the table. "Let us begin," he said. His voice was a baritone boom meant to intimidate. "We are on a tight schedule. Mrs. Vanity has suffered enough indignity without this charade dragging on." "Sit down," Miles Arden said. He did not look up from his file. The attorney blinked. He sat. Elise sat next to him. She pulled her chair out loudly, the scrape echoing in the silence. "This is a formal compliance review of the James Cook Revocable Trust," Miles said. He looked at the court reporter. "We are on the record." He turned to me. "Ms. Cook, as the beneficiary with oversight rights, you requested this review based on allegations of financial irregularity. The floor is yours." I stood up. My legs felt like wood, but I forced them to hold me. I touched the watch on my wrist. I remembered the red stickers. I remembered the Leech comment. I remembered my mother crying in the diner. "I am submitting into evidence the following documents," I said. My voice was clearer than I expected. Arthur handed a binder to Miles, and another to Elise's lawyer. Exhibit A, I said, bank records from the final 6 months of James Cook's life. Exhibit B, gate logs from the Maple Hollow residential community. Exhibit C, an affidavit from Maria Gonzalez, the former housekeeper. Elise's lawyer laughed. It was a dismissive, incredulous sound. Maria Gonzalez? He said. The housekeeper who was fired for theft? This is your evidence? The word of a disgruntled employee? I ignored him. I looked directly at Elise. On October 12th, $20,000 was paid to Venn Strategy Partners. I said, on that same day, Carter Baines visited the residence. On October 24th, another $20,000. Carter Baines visited again. Elise rolled her eyes. She leaned back in her chair. Crossing her arms, my father was consulting with Mr. Baines on a real estate project, she said. It is called business. Naomi, I know you do not understand it. Living in your little library world. But Dad was an entrepreneur. I turned the page in my notes. On November 12th, I said, a loan guarantee for $2 million was signed by my father. The beneficiary of that loan was Venn Development, LLC. Elise's face did not move. She had practiced this face in the mirror. So, she said, he wanted to help a friend. It was his money. He could do what he wanted with it. I pressed a button on the laptop in front of me. I had connected it to the conference room speakers. I am submitting Exhibit D. I said, forensic audio recovered from a recording device in the deceased's possession, authenticated by Blackstone Digital Forensics. Elise went still. Her hand, which had been playing with a diamond pendant at her throat, froze. I clicked play. The sound of static filled the room. Then, my father's voice. I don't want to invest. Elise, I told you. Then Elise's voice. Sharp, cruel, Dad. Don't be difficult. Henderson is on vacation. We need to do this today. Just sign the paper. Do it for me. After everything I do for you. Elise, I am tired. Then sign it so you can sleep. Just sign the damn paper. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys. Elise's lawyer stood up. Objection, he shouted. This is inadmissible. We have no way of knowing the context of this recording. It could be doctored. It could be taken out of context. This is a violation of privacy. It is authenticated, Arthur Vance said softly. His voice cut through the shouting like a razor. And under the terms of the trust, the trustee has wide latitude to consider all evidence of undue influence. Elise was staring at the speaker. Her face had gone pale, the makeup standing out like chalk on a blackboard. You forged that, she whispered. She looked at me with pure hatred. You forged it. You are sick. You are so desperate for money you hired someone to sound like Dad. I looked at her. It is dated November 12th. I said, the gate logs show that on November 12th, Carter Baines did not enter through the main gate, but a van from Premier Staffing did. I pulled up the next document on the screen. This is the intake log for Premier Staffing, I said. It lists the passengers in the van that day. 2 nurses and 1 guest. See? Baines. I looked at Elise's lawyer. You smuggled him in. I said, you fired the housekeeper who would have stopped you. You brought in a man my father despised. And you screamed at a dying man until he signed a guarantee for $2 million so your friend could build a golf course. Elise slammed her hand on the table. You are a liar, she screamed. Her composure shattered. The martyr in white was gone. The bully was back. You are a leech, she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. You were never there. I was the one changing his sheets. I was the one feeding him. I gave up my life for him. And you come in here with your little spreadsheets and try to tell me I did not earn that money? I earned every penny. Thank you, Mrs. Vanity, Miles Arden said. We all turned to him. Miles was writing something on a notepad. He did not look agitated. He looked like a man who had just confirmed a theory. What? Elise snapped. You just admitted that you viewed the inheritance as compensation for your caregiving, Miles said. You said you earned it. So what? Elise said. In a fiduciary context, Miles said. That establishes a transactional motive. It supports the theory of undue influence. He opened the black folder in front of him. But there is another matter, Miles said. He pulled out a single check. It was a copy, enlarged on the screen behind him. This is a check from Venn Strategy Partners, Miles said. It is dated 3 days after the loan guarantee was signed. The amount is $15,000. He looked at the man sitting at the far end of the table. Mr. Henderson, Miles said. I turned. I hadn't even noticed Mr. Henderson was there. He was sitting in the corner, trying to blend into the wallpaper. He looked gray. Me? Mr. Henderson squeaked. Can you explain why a consulting firm owned by Carter Baines wrote a check to your personal law practice with the memo line referral? Miles asked. Mr. Henderson started to sweat. It was instantaneous. Beads of perspiration popped out on his forehead. I have done legal work for Mr. Baines in the past. Henderson stammered. It was for a separate matter. Really? Miles asked. Because the date aligns perfectly with the expedited processing of the loan guarantee. The guarantee you notarized without being present. No, Henderson said. I was present. I reviewed it later. Elise turned on him. Her eyes were wide. Shut up, George, she hissed. Do not say another word. Miles Arden leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, Miles said. If you accepted a kickback to facilitate the signing of a loan guarantee against a client's estate, that is disbarment. It is also a felony. If you want to cooperate, now is the time. Henderson looked at Elise. Then he looked at Miles. He looked at the court reporter. She told me it was what James wanted. Henderson blurted out. He was shaking. Elise told me James wanted to help Carter, but he was too proud to ask me to draft the papers. She said if I just rubber-stamped it, she would make sure I was retained as the estate attorney, and Carter sent the check as a thank you. You idiot, Elise screamed. She stood up. She looked ready to throw her water glass at him. Sit down, Mrs. Vanity, her own lawyer said. He pulled her down by her arm. He looked terrified. Miles Arden closed the file. The trust includes a specific clause. Miles said, It is called the influence audit. He looked at Elise. Your father knew he was vulnerable, Miles said. He knew his health was failing. He knew that in his final months, his judgment might be compromised by those closest to him, so he included a provision. Miles recited from memory. If the trustee finds evidence that any beneficiary utilized their proximity to the grantor to facilitate financial transactions beneficial to themselves or their associates during the 24 months prior to death, such transactions shall be voided, and the beneficiary shall be subject to forfeiture. Elise's mouth opened. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. He wrote that? She whispered. He did, Miles said, and he left us a guide. Miles pressed a button on his console. Another audio file. My father's voice again, but this time he wasn't sounding weak. He sounded sad, resigned. She doesn't ask. My father's voice said. She takes, then calls you selfish for noticing. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. It was the truest thing anyone had ever said about Elise. It was the summary of our entire childhood. She takes, then calls you selfish for noticing. She thinks love is a currency. The voice continued. She thinks if she shows up, I owe her. She's already spending the money in her head. I can see it in her eyes when she brings me the soup. She isn't looking at her father. She is looking at her inventory. The recording ended. The room was silent. Even Mrs. Sterling, the support witness, looked down at her lap. Elise was breathing hard. Her chest heaved. She looked around the room, realizing she was losing the audience. She realized the aggression wasn't working. The Leech accusation hadn't stuck. She needed a new story. She looked at Miles. Her eyes filled with tears. Instant, manufactured tears. He promised me. She sobbed. It was a pivot so fast it gave me whiplash. He promised me. Elise cried. It was private, just between us, late at night. He held my hand and he said, Elise, I want you to have the money for Carter's project. I want you to be happy. He didn't want to tell you, Naomi, because he knew you would be jealous. He knew you would make a scene. She looked at me, her face twisting into a mask of tragic pity. He was protecting you. Naomi, he signed that guarantee because he loved me, and you are twisting it into something ugly because you cannot stand the fact that he chose me. I looked at her. I watched her rewrite history in real time. She was taking the permission she had screamed for and rewriting it as a promise he had whispered. I stood up again. If he promised it, I said quietly, why did you have to smuggle Carter Baines in a van? Why did you have to fire Maria? Why did you have to pay Henderson a bribe? Elise stopped crying. The tears vanished. Because you are a leech, she hissed, and you ruin everything. Miles Arden cleared his throat. This session is concluded, he said. He stood up, based on the evidence presented today, the audio recordings, the gate logs, the admission of Mr. Henderson, and the sworn affidavit of Miss Gonzalez. The trust finds sufficient grounds to trigger the next phase of the administration. He looked at Elise. The assets of the estate are hereby frozen pending a full forensic audit of Venn Strategy Partners and all associated entities. Frozen? Elise shrieked. You cannot freeze my money. I have construction loans. I have deposits due. It is not your money, Mrs. Vanity, Miles said. It is the trust's money. He picked up the black folder. Furthermore, Miles said, the conditions for the opening of the sealed directive have been met. Elise went silent. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The sealed directive? She whispered. I will open it at the next mandatory session. Miles said, 7 days from now. I suggest you bring better counsel, Mrs. Vanity, because based on what I have seen today, the directive is going to be significant. Elise stared at him, then she stared at me. For the first time, I saw it. Her hands were on the table. They were trembling. A fine, uncontrollable tremor. She grabbed her purse. This isn't over, she said. Her voice was shaking. You think you have won? You have no idea who you are dealing with. She turned and marched out of the room. Her lawyers scrambled to follow her, gathering their papers like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Mrs. Sterling hurried after them, not making eye contact with anyone. Mr. Henderson remained in his chair, head in his hands. Arthur Vance leaned over to me. You did good, Naomi, he said softly. You did real good. I nodded. I couldn't speak. I looked at Miles. He gave me a single, barely perceptible nod. I walked out of the room. I walked past the receptionist. I walked into the elevator. I held it together until I got into my car. I sat in the driver's seat of my Corolla in the parking garage. I locked the doors, and then I cried. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a heaving, ugly, gasping sob that came from the bottom of my lungs. I cried for my father, dying in that house with people who saw him as an ATM. I cried for my mother, who was too weak to stop it. I cried for Maria, who had lost her job because she had a conscience, but mostly, I cried because for the first time in 33 years, someone had believed me. I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't the sensitive one. I wasn't the leech. I was right. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked at the watch. Time is truth. I started the car. I knew Elise wasn't done. She was cornered. She was humiliated. She was terrified. A narcissist without a narrative is a dangerous animal. She would spend the next 7 days burning everything down to try and stop that directive from being opened. She would come for me with everything she had left, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I drove out of the garage and into the sunlight. 7 days. I could wait. 2 days before the final session. My phone rang at 11 o'clock at night. I was awake. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by boxes of files, organizing the chaos into a timeline that made sense. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize, but the area code was from the capital. I answered, Ms. Cook, a voice said. It was a man's voice, smooth and expensive. It sounded like aged scotch and leather seats. My name is Robert Sterling. I am a senior partner at Sterling. Hearts and more. I have been retained by your sister to facilitate a global resolution to this unfortunate family dispute. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. I learned that from Miles. Silence makes people nervous. It makes them fill the void. Ms. Cook? He asked. I am here. I said, Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. Look, Naomi, we all know where this is going. Litigation is ugly. It is public. It destroys reputations. Your sister loves you. She wants to protect the family legacy. She is authorized to make you a one-time, comprehensive offer. I waited. $5 million, he said. The number hung in the air. $5 million. It was more money than I would earn in 10 lifetimes at the library. It was enough to buy a house, a car, a new life. It was enough to disappear. Cash, wire transfer, executed within 24 hours. Sterling continued. Tax-free structure. In exchange, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all estate matters. You will formally resign your position as oversight beneficiary. You will acknowledge that the audit found no irregularities, and you will walk away. I looked at the watch on my wrist. The second hand swept around the dial. Tick, tick, tick. You are offering me $5 million to say I was wrong. I said, we are offering you a future. Ms. Cook, no, I said, you are offering me a muzzle. Sterling's voice dropped an octave. It lost the warmth. It became steel. Ms. Cook, let me be frank. If you refuse this offer, the next few days will be very difficult for you. My client has significant reach. Public opinion is a fragile thing. You are a single woman with a history of, let us call it emotional sensitivity. Do you really want your entire life turned inside out in the press? I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I had at the funeral. The feeling of the door clicking shut. They were terrified. You do not offer $5 million if you have a strong case. You offer it when you know the walls are closing in. Tell Elise I said no. I said, and tell her to save her money. She's going to need it for her legal defense. I hung up. I turned off my phone. I went to sleep. I woke up to a digital massacre. I turned on my phone at 7 a.m. to check the weather. Instead, I found my name. A link had been sent to my email, my Facebook, my LinkedIn. It was an article from a website called The Hollow Observer, a local news blog that I knew for a fact was funded by the real estate developers in Elise's circle. The headline was in bold, black letters, The Greedy Sister, How Naomi Cook Returned to Maple Hollow to Cash In on a Dying Father. I read the first paragraph. My stomach churned. Sources close to the Cook family report that Naomi Cook, the estranged younger daughter of the late James Cook, has launched a campaign of harassment against her grieving sister and the estate trustees. Cook, who has a documented history of financial instability and workplace conflicts, is allegedly demanding a multi-million-dollar payout to cease her attacks. It quoted family friends who said I was unstable and always jealous of Elise. It claimed I had abandoned my father while Elise cared for him. It painted me as a predator who had swooped in to pick the carcass clean. I opened my inbox. It was full. You should be ashamed of yourself. Leave your sister alone. Gold digger. Get a job. Strangers. People who did not know me, did not know my father, did not know the truth. They were reacting to a story Elise had crafted. She had weaponized the town against me. She had turned my grief into a public spectacle. I sat at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking. I wanted to reply. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the audio recordings, the bank statements, the truth, but I didn't. I closed the laptop. Elise wanted a reaction. She wanted me to look crazy. She wanted me to get online and start a comment war so she could point to it in court and say, "See? She is unhinged." I was not going to give her that satisfaction. I made coffee. I showered. I put on my black suit. I put on the watch. Let them talk. Let them type. The truth was not on the internet. The truth was in a sealed envelope in a conference room 40 miles away. I drove to the Arden building. The atmosphere was different this time. In the lobby, there were 2 uniformed security guards standing by the elevators. When I gave my name, one of them stepped forward. "I will escort you up." Ms. Cook, he said. We rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, I saw why. The hallway was lined with security. Miles Arden was taking no chances. I walked into the conference room. The table was clear except for one object. In the center of the black granite slab sat a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. The wax was stamped with my father's initials. J.C. Miles Arden stood at the window. Looking out at the city, Arthur Vance, my attorney, was already seated. "Good morning, Naomi," Arthur said. He looked tired. "Did you see the article?" "I saw it." I said, "Ignore it." Arthur said, "It is noise. It is chaff." I sat down. I clasped my hands in front of me. I stared at the red wax seal. 5 minutes later, the doors opened. Elise walked in. She was not wearing white today. She was wearing red, a bright, aggressive crimson suit. She looked like a wound. She looked like a war. She was smiling. It was a tight, brittle smile, but it was there. She walked with a bounce in her step. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the smear campaign had broken me. She thought the offer of $5 million meant I knew they had power. She didn't know I had refused it, or maybe she did, and she just didn't care because she thought she was untouchable. She sat down. Her lawyer, the man with the tan, sat next to her. He looked less confident than she did. He looked like a man who knew he was billing by the hour for a losing cause. "Shall we get this over with?" Elise asked. She checked her watch, a diamond-encrusted Cartier that caught the light. "I have a press conference at noon to address the allegations." She emphasized the word allegations with a sneer. Miles Arden turned from the window. He walked to the head of the table. He did not sit down. "This is the final mandatory session of the James Cook Revocable Trust," Miles said. He looked at Elise, then he looked at me. "The conditions for opening the sealed directive have been satisfied," Miles said. "The influence audit confirmed irregular payments. The forensic analysis confirmed the authenticity of the audio recordings. The testimony of Maria Gonzalez has been corroborated." Elise waved her hand. "We contest all of that," she said breezily. "It is all circumstantial. But go ahead. Open the envelope. Let us see what the old man wanted to say." She leaned forward. She looked eager. "She thinks she is in the will." I realized. She thinks that even with the fraud, even with the fighting, Dad couldn't bring himself to cut her out. She thinks the directive is just a lecture, a slap on the wrist before she gets the check. Miles reached for the envelope. "The directive can only be opened if both beneficiaries are present," Miles said, "and if both beneficiaries acknowledge that they are bound by its terms." "I acknowledge," I said. Elise sighed. "I acknowledge." "Just open it." Miles picked up a letter opener. It was a silver blade, sharp and clean. He slid it under the wax seal. Crack! The sound was loud in the quiet room. I looked down at my wrist. I checked the time. It was 10:14. I tapped the crystal face of the watch twice with my index finger. It was a reflex. It was what my father did. And suddenly, I understood. He had staged this. He had visualized this moment. He knew we would be here. He knew Elise would be wearing red. He knew I would be quiet. He had set the stage. Now he was going to deliver the lines. Miles pulled out a document. It was bound in blue paper. He began to read. "I, James Cook, being of sound mind and body, do hereby establish the final distribution terms of my estate." Miles paused. "To my daughter, Elise Vanity." Elise sat up straighter. She smirked at me. "I leave the entirety of the liquid assets, the real estate portfolio, and the investment accounts, valued at approximately $42 million. Elise gasped. She slammed her hands on the table. "Yes," she shouted. She turned to me. I told you he loved me. I told you he wouldn't leave me with nothing." She laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. $42 million, she screamed. "And you get nothing. You Leech, you get nothing." "Mrs. Vanity," Miles said. His voice was like a whip crack. "Sit down. I am not finished. Elise froze. She slowly sat back down. The smile faltered. However, Miles read, the word hung in the air. However, due to the demonstrated pattern of financial manipulation and lack of fiscal responsibility shown by my daughter Elise, these assets shall not be distributed directly to her. Elise's face went gray. Instead, Miles read, all assets shall be placed into the Cook Family Preservation Trust. This trust shall be a permanent entity. Elise Vanity shall be the sole beneficiary of the income generated by the trust. Provided she meets the compliance standards, the trust shall be managed by a governance board. Miles turned the page. The governance board shall consist of 3 members, 1 professional trustee, 1 independent financial advisor, he looked up, and 1 family protector, who shall hold veto power over all discretionary distributions. Miles looked at me. I name my daughter, Naomi Cook, as the permanent family protector. She cannot be removed from this position unless an independent board votes unanimously that she is incapacitated. The silence was absolute. Elise stared at Miles. Then she stared at me. What? She whispered. She has to ask me for the money. I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. You get the money. Elise, but I hold the checkbook. If you want to buy a house, you have to submit a request to the board. If you want to go on vacation, you have to submit a budget. And I have to approve it. No, Elise said. She stood up. No, that is not legal. You cannot do that. He wouldn't do that. He did. Miles said. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Elise, but he wanted to make sure you couldn't destroy what he built, and he wanted to make sure you couldn't hurt anyone else. This is a joke, Elise screamed. She looked at her lawyer. Do something. This is a restraint on alienation. It is illegal. Actually, her lawyer said quietly. Looking at the document, it is perfectly legal. It is a spendthrift trust with a special power of appointment. It is airtight. Elise made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at me with eyes that were black with hate. I will kill you, she whispered. I will sue you until you die. I will never ask you for a penny. I will starve first. There is one more thing, Miles said. He reached into the envelope again. He pulled out a USB drive. In addition to the governance structure, Miles said, the directive includes a codicil regarding the loan guarantee. He plugged the drive into the laptop. A video window popped up on the screen. It was a recording. The camera was shaky. It looked like it had been filmed on a phone in a car. The face on the screen was Mrs. Sterling, Elise's character witness, the woman who had sat in this room 7 days ago and praised Elise's moral fiber. But in the video, Mrs. Sterling was crying. She was sitting in the passenger seat of a car. State your name, a voice said from behind the camera. It was Miles Arden's voice. Margaret Sterling. The woman on the screen sobbed. Did you witness James Cook sign the loan guarantee on November 12th? No, Mrs. Sterling said. I wasn't there. Why did you say you were? Elise paid me. Mrs. Sterling wept. She gave me $10,000 in cash. She said it was just a technicality. She said James wanted to sign it, but he was too sick. So we were just helping him. She said if I didn't back her up, she would get me kicked off the garden club board. Did Elise Vanity know that the signature was obtained under duress? Yes, Mrs. Sterling said. She told me she had to scream at him for an hour before he finally broke. The video ended. Elise stood frozen. She looked at the screen. She looked at Mrs. Sterling, who was not in the room today. You turned her, Elise whispered. She looked at Miles. You intimidated her. This is entrapment. No, Miles said. This is a confession. Elise turned to me. Her face was twisted, ugly, unrecognizable. You set me up, she shrieked. You and this lawyer. You conspired against me. You made Dad do this. You manipulated him. She was screaming now, pacing the room, waving her arms. You are the thief. You are the liar. You are the leech. I stood up. I walked around the table. I walked until I was standing 3 feet from her. She stopped screaming. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. I looked her in the eye. I looked at the fear behind the rage. "Elise," I said. She stared at me. "If I am a leech," I asked quietly, "why did you need to steal?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "If I am the one who is greedy," I said, "why did you have to forge signatures? Why did you have to fire maids? Why did you have to bribe lawyers? Why did you have to lie?" I took a step closer. "You didn't need to steal the money. Elise, he left it to you. He left you $42 million. All you had to do was wait. All you had to do was be a daughter." I pointed to the document. "But you couldn't wait. You had to take, and because you took, you lost control." Elise stared at me. The reality was crashing down on her. She had the money, but she had lost the power. She was rich, but she was a child again, answering to her little sister. Miles Arden stood up. Based on the sworn confession of Mrs. Sterling, Miles said, "The trust is legally obligated to report this matter to the authorities." Elise whipped her head around. "What?" "However," Miles said, "the directive offers an alternative." He slid a paper across the table. "A civil consent decree," Miles said. "You agree to the terms of the trust. You agree to the governance structure. You agree to a mandatory investigative financial review of all your personal assets to recover the funds paid to Venn Strategy. And if I don't?" Elise whispered. "Then we turn the tape over to the district attorney," Miles said. "And we file civil charges for elder abuse and fraud." Elise looked at the paper. She looked at the door. She looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer closed his briefcase. "Sign it." "Elise," he said. Elise looked at me one last time. The hate was still there, but the fire was gone. She looked small. She looked defeated. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She signed. Miles took the paper. The assets of the estate remain frozen pending the completion of the investigative review. Miles said, "You will receive a monthly stipend for living expenses. The board will review your first budget request next month." Elise dropped the pen. She didn't storm out this time. She didn't scream. She just turned and walked out the door. Her red suit looking like a stain against the white walls. The door closed. The room was quiet. Then, the other door opened, the one leading to the waiting room. My mother walked in. Patricia looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen. She had clearly been crying for hours. She must have been waiting outside, listening, or maybe Elise had texted her. "Naomi," she said. Her voice was a broken croak. "Mom," I said. She ran to me. She grabbed my arms. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Fix it," she begged. I stared at her. "Fix what?" "Fix this," she cried. "Fix it for your sister. She can't live like this. Naomi, she can't have you controlling her money. It will kill her. She has too much pride. Please, you have the power now. Just sign it over to her. Just let her have it." I looked at my mother. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She wasn't asking about the smear campaign. She wasn't asking about the fraud. She was asking me to sacrifice myself again. She was asking me to shrink so Elise could expand. She was asking me to erase the consequences of Elise's actions because the truth was too uncomfortable for the family to bear. "Naomi, please." Patricia wept. "Be the bigger person. Be the good daughter. For me?" I gently removed her hands from my arms. I stepped back. "No. Mom," I said. Patricia froze. "What?" "I am not fixing this." I said, "I didn't break it. Elise broke it. Dad fixed it. I am just holding the watch." "But she is your sister," Patricia wailed. "I know," I said, "and that is why I am going to do exactly what Dad asked me to do. I am going to protect the family from her, and that includes you." I looked at Arthur Vance. "I am done," I said. I picked up my purse. I walked past my mother. She was still crying, standing in the middle of the room, mourning the loss of the lie she had lived in for 40 years. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a grief for the mother I wanted but never had. But under the grief, there was relief, clean, cold, solid relief. I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the hall past the security guards. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the street. The air was cold. The city was loud. The sun was shining. I rolled up my sleeve. I looked at the Patek Philippe on my wrist. The gold caught the sunlight. The second hand swept around. Tick, tick, tick. I wasn't a leech. I wasn't a victim. I was the family protector. And for the first time in my life, I had plenty of time. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was walking towards something real. The story of the leech was over. The story of Naomi was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to You Are a Leech. My sister demanded the inheritance. This story was a journey into the dark heart of family dynamics. Where money exposes the truth and silence is the most dangerous weapon of all. I hope Naomi's victory gave you the same satisfaction it gave me to write it. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, karma, and the long road to truth. Until next time, keep watching the time.